I've already talked about the Peruvian elections quite a lot, but some new shit has been going down there, right? And I'm going to talk about that now. This is the absolute craziest development from Peru so far. I don't really know how to put it in a way that people aren't familiar with Peru can easily, grasp how fucking weird it is. Imagine if it came out that Henry Kissinger orchestrated the rise of Donald Trump from start to finish and tried to manipulate everything in his favor the entire time. It's kind of sort of equivalent to that. To give you guys just the rundown on what happened before this, so, there was the election in Peru a couple of weeks ago. Keiko Fujimori, the daughter of the fascist dictator Alberto Fujimori, who essentially just is a one-to-one copy of him politics-wise, lost an election to Pedro Castillo, who is a leftist rural peasant teacher. And ever since then, she's been, replicating sort of Trump's narrative that there was a fraud based on absolutely no evidence, despite the fact that all international observers and all electoral authorities, etc., in Peru say that there's nothing wrong with the election. And it's also obviously absurd because Castillo has no institutional power. So how the fuck could he possibly organize a fraud in the first place? Right? So there was that, right? And that's been ongoing. Fujimori has been holding rallies every single day saying, stop the steal, there's a fraud, presenting no proof. And there's been a couple of maneuvers that she's done to try and overturn the election in that time, aside from her rallying and trying to create a false narrative of fraud. For example, she, or at least her faction, tried to get the electoral authority to increase the deadline through which ballots can be contested, because she hadn't managed to contest all the ballots that she wanted to, which were all, by the way, for completely ridiculous reasons, invalid reasons. Basically, she was just taking a bunch of random ballots and saying, look, this is clearly fraudulent. And then the electoral authority, when they look at them, is there's literally nothing wrong with this. And she basically wanted them to look at more of those ballots and just waste everyone's time for longer. The electoral authority, without any sort of public notice, just randomly in private decided to hold a vote amongst the four people on the ruling council, because it's ruled by a bunch of judges and lawyers, or controlled by four judges and lawyers who are the bosses. They plan to hold a vote that would increase the deadline in favor of Keiko Fujimori to allow her to try to contest more votes in this bullshit way. The media caught wind of this and released, the plans became public. 3 of the judges ended up voting against this measure. They got cold feet on the entire plan because of the fact that it was made public and there was a huge outcry. So that failed. And then after that, a week later, a bunch of retired military generals released a series of letters saying that, there's been this massive fraud, and if Castillo is sworn as president, we will be forced to do a military coup against him. Stuff like that. Clearly, just people cannot accept that they've lost an election, trying to, cast doubt on it, and basically doing everything they can to seize power illegitimately. So yesterday, a series of audio files were released that originate from a prison called the Callao Naval Base Prison. There's this guy being held who I need to introduce to you now. His name is Vladimiro Montesinos. Montesinos is an interesting character. In the 70s and the 80s, he was a CIA spy who betrayed the Peruvian military by giving state military secrets to the CIA. He also, independent of that, spied for the US Embassy. And the sentence for that was death, but he got off on it. Then after that, he went into exile in Ecuador and ended up giving Ecuador Peruvian military secrets as well, which was a big deal at the time because Ecuador and Peru had an actual war over their border just a few years later. And then at the beginning of the Alberto Fujimori dictatorship, this guy just randomly turns up and suddenly becomes Alberto Fujimori's right-hand man. So he took control of the intelligence services during Fujimori's dictatorship and used his ties with organized crime, with drug traffickers, to basically create a network of death squads, of a massive network of corruption and bribes. He paid off 90% of the country's media to be favorable to Fujimori, and any of them who refused to be favorable to Fujimori got murdered. He paid off like opposition politicians to join the Fujimori side, basically mass murdered a ton of people. Probably the single most corrupt figure in that we know of, at least in Latin American history. He spent like easily probably $500 million to $1 billion on bribes, which the money that he got for that was from the Peruvian state. Basically, he was the guy who propped up Fujimori. He was the guy who like manipulated the media environment, who repressed his opponents, who killed his opponents, all to create this narrative that Fujimori was good and anyone who said otherwise was killed, basically. He was the guy who orchestrated that. So for all of that stuff, he's in prison, right? And at the end of the Fujimori dictatorship, what brought them down was that there was a bunch of videos that leaked out of this guy meeting with opposition politicians and saying, bribing them. And he made them sign contracts saying like, in exchange for $40,000 per month, I pledge my loyalty to Fujimori. Stuff like that. And that is what brought them down, those videos being discovered. He said he had like 5,000 of those videos. So what that means is he basically bribed like 90% of Peruvian politicians and journalists at the time. He easily spent like $500 million on that. So anyway, he's been in jail for like, I think 15 years at this point for those crimes. In a jail that he built, by the way, called the Callao Naval Base Prison. And so it turns out that he's the guy who organized all of what I said regarding like Fujimori's fraud narrative regarding the coup attempts in both the electoral tribunal and the letter from the military. He's behind all of that because some audios filtered out of him calling like his connections, telling them to do exactly those things that then just happened to happen. And he also bribed all 4 judges on the electoral tribunal with a $1 million bribe each. And he's the one who said that, they should try to do a coup with ex-military. He's also been personally organizing protests to like spread the fraud narrative and stuff. And it's absolutely fucking insane. Because he's literally in jail. And so it turns out that the calls that he made, the fucking calls that this fucking guy made, in which he orchestrated all of this, were from the office of the fucking warden. Literally from the warden's office. The warden's own fucking office. So he personally has access to the phone in the warden's office where he's apparently orchestrating coups against like the official electoral results. Amazing stuff, right? Like that's the phone. That's the phone number right there from which he called. And, you can look it up. Like the admiral of the Callao Naval Base's office. Insane shit. Isn't that interesting, right? Like, so he's obviously behind this entire coup attempt. Like, the entire coup attempt, the whole bullshit fraud narrative, trying to annul the results of the election. This raises the question of, like, what else is this guy behind? What else has he been behind, right? If he has this much power and influence from prison. In the last 15 fucking years, like, since the fall of Fujimori, what else has this guy been behind? Obviously, this is not even remotely the beginning of it. Like the single most corrupt individual in like definitely Peruvian history, probably Latin American political history as well, suddenly resurfaces with like essentially indisputable proof that he's been the one who has been behind every single shitty thing that has happened since the election results came out. It has been confirmed that the audios are really him. The Navy themselves have acknowledged it today. The Navy's excuse here, which no one fucking believes, is that he deceived them by, instead of calling his wife, he called these people and like organized these things, right? They're saying that they were just like normal calls that are given to prisoners, in order to contact their family, which is obviously a fucking lie because he called from the fucking the office of the boss of the fucking prison. If you're making a call to your family, you're not invited to the fucking office of the fucking warden to do it, okay? Yeah, just a normal everyday call to my family from the fucking warden's personal phone line. Normal stuff. It's clear, like, he's a prisoner there, but he basically controls the place. And if he's just tried to orchestrate a coup attempt from there, who fucking knows what else he's been orchestrating from there this entire time? And of course, like, the mainstream Peruvian media basically has like a total blackout on this. They're not talking about this at all. Like 10% of the media in Peru is talking about it. You know, like the people who are telling you that Pedro Castillo is corrupt and going to destroy democracy are the people who defend this. The people who are saying that there's a fraud in Peru, you know, the people who support Keiko Fujimori, like fucking the Vargas Llosa family. They are the people who support a campaign being orchestrated by a literal fucking the head of Peru's Gestapo, a drug trafficking organized criminal who was directly ordered the murder of hundreds upon hundreds of people, who spent $500 million fucking dollars on bribes to prop up a dictatorship. This is who they are aligned with. This is who supports them. This is what the Latin American right really fucking are and always have been. It's just that this is also one of the few times where it's where it's so fucking clear and obvious to anyone with a brain, because we have such obvious evidence in these audio files. It's seriously like, this is like the real life equivalent of Palpatine has returned. He's in prison now. We don't have to worry about him anymore. And it's like, oh wait, shit. He's in prison and he actually controls everything still. Whoa! I guess Palpatine didn't die when he was kicked down that fucking shaft. It's like the plot of a shitty movie. So yeah, Peruvian election just like, honestly, like, it just keeps getting wilder and wilder, doesn't it? Like, every single thing that happens in the Peruvian election is more fucked up and crazy than the last. Like, where could it possibly go from here to get any worse? Where could it possibly fucking go? I don't fucking know. But I guess I'll try and keep you guys updated. It's hard to keep up with it at this point, honestly. Is anything Fujimori doing working? Well, she's managed to, like, get her supporters riled up, but none of the institutional stuff has worked yet at all. I mean, and she has no international support at all. So, like, there's no practical way that she could take power. But a funny thing is that the guy who released these audios was the same guy who released the videos from 20 years ago that brought Fujimori's government down, with Vladimir Montesinos in them. Like he showed these audios where clearly Montesinos wants to do a coup to overthrow Castillo, and his conclusion, right, because this guy's like a neoliberal himself. He's just like a neoliberal who doesn't like the other neoliberals like Fujimori. His conclusion was that we need a new election in which Fujimori and Castillo both cannot run. That was his solution, right? Apparently, like, we need to annul the elections because the losers are trying to overturn the result in their own favor. So we need to annul the elections, and the winner of the election should not be allowed to run anymore because of what the losers are doing. That's his solution. That's his genius fucking solution. As a neoliberal who likes Fujimori's policies but doesn't like the fact that she's the one doing them, but who also hates the fact that Pedro Castillo is a brown peasant who wants to give poor people healthcare. Classic liberal stuff, right? Classic liberaloid stuff. Typical liberaloids. What's the guy's name again? Hold on, let me look. The guy who I just talked about is Fernando Oliveira. Like, he wants to have his cake and eat it too, right? Like, he doesn't like Fujimori. He doesn't like that Fujimori is trying to do a coup, but he also kind of wants there to be a coup, just one that isn't done by Fujimori. His solution is, well, maybe we can just have a new election in which both new candidates are neoliberals, but neither of them are Fujimori, please? Please. Classic neoliberaloid phenotype.